find those videos if you go to youtube.com/user/a TESOL. So if you go to the TESOL channel, then you'll find the American TESOL webinar recordings. We are going to talk about Clil today, and of course we have the esltech.com course, all American TESOL. If you're part of American TESOL, it's free for you, so that's pretty cool. And with the ESL Tech course, you get a certification in teaching with technology, and you can do it at your own pace. So when we talk about Clil, Clil is actually quite popular around the world. It's content language integrated learning. There are many different acronyms in when you're teaching English language learners. And when I find that if you do a search for a hashtag Clil, if you put that in Google, you're going to find a lot of great resources. But you'll also find a lot of great resources if you look under STEAM and STEM. So usually, and I've done training, I did a couple of week-long workshops training teachers in Clil in Brazil. And I know we have at least one teacher today from Brazil. And so when we were doing this, a lot of times when it's content and language, but it's not that students take an English class. Instead, the teacher will teach geography or biology, and then they also teach English as well. So for teachers, it can be difficult because it's hard to figure out what's the right balance. So it may be tough at first if you start it. If you look at STEAM and STEM, they have a lot of science, technology, math, and so you'll find a lot of good resources for Clil there too. A little history about Clil. David Marsh is actually the founder of this acronym. In 1994, he says this is when we talk about Clil, it's subject, okay, so or parts of subjects, and then taught through a foreign language. In America, a lot of times we have, for example, history for language learners. I've taught world religions to language learners. I've taught health. So I've taught a lot. I've done a lot of Clil, especially with teenagers. Now there's different types of Clil. So if you're just starting or if you're asked by your institute to start teaching a subject, then you have a couple of choices. You can do soft Clil. Soft is where you have some language learning is taught with the content, and then there's hard Clil, where language and content are both taught at the same time. So for example, let's say that there was a diagram of the cycle of butterflies, okay, the life cycle of the butterfly. It becomes, you'll see where it's a caterpillar and then it becomes a butterfly. You might do that with a diagram. They might see the diagram and then they can learn that vocabulary, butterfly, cocoon, and things like that. So they're learning a lot of vocabulary, but they're also learning about the cycle of a butterfly. So that's what Clil is. Translanguage. So sometimes when teachers are starting off, they find it very difficult. Their students, one of the participants in the chat box had mentioned earlier that it can be very, very difficult. And that's where translanguage comes in, because sometimes they'll do in both English and the learner's native tongue, because you can imagine that math and science and biology and geography and chemistry and teaching that to language learners in English can be very, very difficult for them. So a lot of times you'll have translanguage, where sometimes if a student doesn't understand or know, you can teach them the vocabulary in that way. They're able to understand then you'll realize that they actually know the content sometimes. They just didn't understand the word. Also, there's a lot of theories and concepts when you're talking about science and math. If you're teaching geography, it depends if you're teaching geography of if you're teaching geography of your area, or if you're teaching geography around the world. That could be difficult for language learners as well if they haven't visited those particular countries. Um, in Europe, what they say is also that in Clil there should be an integration of the four C's. So you have your content or your subject matter. It's the same. So your content, what is your content? Okay. Um, is your content math? Is it science? Is it chemistry? Is it, whatever the content is that you're teaching, you should be very familiar with the content. So sometimes when we have a CLIL curriculum, the teacher isn't very familiar with the subject either. And there's lots of ways to study about the topic. Nowadays, you have a lot of online learning. You can follow people in that field. You can follow teachers who teach in that particular field and area, and you can learn a lot from them. There's also communication, because that's very important for language learners. How are we going to get students not only to learn chemistry or geography or history or whatever math, but how will they also communicate? How will we can teach them about a butterfly cycle, but what is going to be the language activity where they share that information with their peers? So we have to go that extra step. It can't just be teaching the content. There's cognition, and cognition relates to the brain, and it's what your students already know, what they can observe, and how they can build upon that to really start understanding difficult concepts. Culture, we can also introduce culture as well. And by culture, it means, for example, if we can teach about other countries, one of my favorite activities is where students get to um, plot the migration of the monarch butterfly. And so they can take pictures, they can see when it's in their area, they can read where the butterfly is going to next and study that country. But there's a lot of ways to integrate the four C's in Clil. So here's a lot of ideas, and there's many, many, many more ideas out there. Realia. So in the chat box, you can type in some of these ideas that you already have used. For example, I'm sure some of you may have used digital storytelling or storytelling, where your students write stories. Maybe TPR. Anybody know what TPR is? A total physical response. Yes. Okay. Annabella says she does Realia. Christina says role plays. Realia, a lot of times teachers ask me, what is Realia? Realia is when you come and bring an object in the world so that students can study. So one of my favorite that my teachers used to do is bring in like geodes, and I really love that. Or perhaps you'll bring in like they used to sometimes bring animals that were stuffed so you could see the animal. That was a little creepy, but sometimes we would have actual. There was a time when my teacher brought in a snake expert, and we got to touch and a really huge snake. I don't remember what snake it was, but it was pretty. It was huge. It went around around the whole class. And so there's a lot of different ones that you've used, and diagrams, flashcards, role plays, visuals. And so all of these foldables, Maria Jose said she used foldables too. So a lot of these you're already familiar with. And for language learners, we know that that's really, really important um, to be able to visualize or be engaged with the learning. And they learn content better that way, and they also learn the language better that way. If they're playing a game, then and they have to use English, they have more fun doing that. Or singing songs. So you can even do things like singing songs. So I'm going to present a few sites, technology, free sites that are really helpful with integrating Clil as well. With Clil, one way to teach the content is invite a guest expert. You can invite someone anywhere around the world, um, that's that's either even museums. You can have someone from a museum come in. There's a lot of experts, and if you want to find them, one of the best ways is to go on Skype. So Skype actually has a section. Now I think Microsoft is has taken over Skype, and so they have made education Skype.com. And with Skype, you can register, it's free, but they have lessons, they have other teachers you can connect with, they have guest speaker section, and they also have an author section. So what you'll do is you'll look for someone in that particular, you can do a search for it. I would love to go. So Skype is, I think, one of those really easy ways to really get your students interested. And what I do is I get my students to write questions. They have to develop questions, and the questions, we'll edit them, we'll peer edit, and we'll make sure that they're grammatically correct, that they're related to the actual speaker. And so the students get to practice the language. They get to learn how to create questions, and also they learn the tense for that question. There's also demonstrations. So one of my favorite demonstrations is walking in with a big bowl of water, and the students will have little things like a eraser, or they might have a rock, they might have a safety pin, and what they have to decide is whether that object is going to sink or float in the water. Okay, so they make these predictions. They predict whether if their object is going to sink or float, and so they come up to the class, and then they put the object, and then we all see. So the students are really excited when that happens. I have worn lab coats before and made it very, very interesting. We've done things with here it's dry ice. So there's a lot of ways that you can walk into the classroom and have a demonstration. I find it easier if you have a cart, so you can get a cart and put that in the cart, roll it in, and then when you're finished with the demonstration, then you can roll it out. And of course, you can always invite a local community expert to come in. A lot will do it for free. We used to invite the meteorologist, and he would have the students do things with the weather. So that was really interesting. There are QR codes. QR codes are a great way to interact with content, okay? These are free apps that you can download, and your students will be able to scan and see the information. This is what a QR code looks like. It's this little, you've probably seen them many places. You can find them in coupons. You can find them everywhere. They're on billboards. You just find them everywhere. Movie posters. So these are free apps so that you can create them, and also that way you can scan them. So one of my favorite ones is this periodic table of videos. So you scan that particular QR code for that element, and your students will be able to see a video. This is on Flickr, and if you're looking for all the links, don't worry. You can go to shellyterrell.com/Clil, and you'll be able to find slides and the links to these different sites. One of my favorite ways I've seen QR codes used is the PE Geek. So he teaches health, and what he does is he has students scan the codes around the different parts of the body of a skeleton. Now, I like that because that's really difficult to teach students. A lot of language learners would have difficulties. I had difficulties, and I'm a native speaker, but I had a hard time learning about the parts of the body. Phalanges, the femur. It's difficult to remember all of that, and that's not typical English. So QR codes, if they scan them, they can find a video, they can answer a question, they can answer a poll, and they'll be able to remember instead of just labeling, because sometimes just labeling, they won't be able to remember. You can use comics. A lot of different comics have science, math, geography. They have a lot of those topics covered. And so if you're reading a comic, and now there's a lot of readers and they look like graphic novels. Penguin has some good ones that I used to use. So for language learners, just ask your publisher, and they'll have different comic or graphic novels for language learners. They usually have like a few special ones. And that makes it more interesting to learn about your content, to learn your content. Um, I really like this idea. This was made with bit strips. And this is actually from a teacher, rowthinkswordpress.com. And what he does is he has many different math problems, word problems, that he made into comics. Your students can do the same. They can get a word problem from the book and then they can put it in comic form. Or if they're reading a novel, if they're reading a chapter, they can visualize it with a comic. They can also do actual field research. So this is something that I really love to do with my learners. Now, if the weather is great, then that's fantastic. So it's not something you can do all the time, but there are some times you can do it. One of the ways we did field research means that you're in the field. You're doing research, you're observing, you're writing down, you're mapping. So you can have your students do that over a series, over an amount of time. So, for example, one that we used to do is they can observe um, a particular environment, like maybe a plant, and then every single day they can look at that area and they can write down the bugs that go there, what they can classify, identify the bugs. There's many different ways that they can do field research. So if there's a time frame where it's nice in your country, you can get them to go ahead and go outside, and they can actually make these observations and label while they're actually in the field. Now, a really great app for this, there's a lot of apps that have been developed and they're free. This one is for iOS and Android, and I believe there's a Kindle version. But now they are all over the world. There's these apps that are getting people to become citizen scientists. So you can try this yourself. What it is that Project Noah, you are saying what you spot. Like if you spot a bird in your backyard, you can take a picture, upload it. You can have up to 5. You can identify it. You can see what others in the area. You can access an encyclopedia, Wikipedia. It's all within the app, and it helps you identify birds or bugs or even plants and trees. It's all within the app. So this is a great way for your students to contribute to a world database that has what different types of countries, rocks, and ecosystems are. So that's really exciting. You can have them brainstorm. And one of the ways that I really like students to brainstorm, this was actually from one of my sessions. I just passed around my iPad and then they were able to draw on it. But one great way is through graphic organizers. So I love graphic organizers. And if you go to shelleyterrell.com/brainstorm, I'm going to go ahead and put that in the chat box, then you'll be able to find different sites for graphic organizers, such as Lucidchart, that's free. Mind mapping, like Coggle, Bubble. So there's so Mind 42, there's tons of them when you go to that link. One of the ones that I really like, so I'm just going to show you one, is creately.com. Now I believe that you get 4 for free. You might be able to get more. I'm not sure, but it is free. And the reason I like it is because there's so many different types of diagrams, flow charts, um, and so this has it really helps your students to with their cognitive development. Remember the 4 C's we talked about: cognition. So this is a way to really help the brain. And you can even add pictures because it's online. You can add pictures, you can add links. It's really nice. The other one I really like a lot is Poplet, but this one has actual templates, so that's why I like Creately, because it gives you those templates, and then you just get to decide which one you think is best for the activity. The great thing about graphic organizers is if the technology doesn't work, if you don't have a classroom full of computers, then that's okay, because a lot of times you can just print out, they give you the option, so you can print out that fish diagram or the KWHL. A lot of times, if I don't have paper as well, or my students don't, what we do is we just draw it, and we work in pairs, and we fill out that graphic organizer together. So graphic organizers are great because you can integrate technology, and if you don't have the technology, if you don't have an internet connection, well, then your students can just draw on a piece of paper, and they can still create the graphic organizer. You can have them create experiments. I actually wrote a lesson plan, and a template on how student, and I believe that's part of the that you're going to find there, the lesson plan, and it is actually how to make it's a magic spell or a potion. It's not necessarily a love potion. They work in pairs, and the students, one of them is pretending to make the actual potion, okay? And the other student is letting that student know what kind of potion they want. So they can have a potion to get better grades, to pass their tests. They can have a potion, they could have a love potion, I guess. A potion to make them better at a particular sport, at music. So there's many, many different potions out there. And then they come up with together the recipe, and they are able to be creative. Okay, so here you see this isn't my student who made this, but the student said, juice 50 giant strawberries, collect from 3 pink butterfly wings, dust from 3 butterfly wings, find someone to kiss. So they can be very creative, and that helps them practice language. They're writing directions, instructions, and they're also learning, and it's fun. There's 6-second videos. I don't know if you've heard of Vine.co, but you know how Instagram has very short videos, 15 seconds? Well, Vine has only, it's 6 seconds, and General Electric has a channel, and you can find it here at 6secondscience.tumblr.com. That's where General Electric has put all of their videos. It's only 6 seconds, but in those 6 seconds, it teaches you like the science behind bubbles, the science behind fish, and you see a lot of experiments. People from all over the world, students all over the world, actually participate in the 6-second science fair. They submit 6-second videos as well. Yes, it is amazing, Peggy, what you can do in 6 seconds. They have a new series now where you can add emojis. So they have emoji science, and you can go to emojiscience.com. My students, every time I go around the world, students love emojis. So they'll pay attention to your subject matter. The great thing about emoji is you can add culture within that too. So you have your content, and then you also have the culture, because now emojis actually come in different ethnicities. So you can find that as well. These are different videos. When you click, you'll find a video with an experiment. These are from Bill Nye, the science guy. He's one of my favorite people. I absolutely love Bill Nye. So he creates these videos, emoji science videos, and they're really fun. This particular one, he's doing the science behind superheroes. So you see Superman flying by and he's talking. It's really, really short. These videos are actually about 2 minutes or less. And so he has tons of these where he explains the science behind different concepts and theories. And it's visual with the emojis. So your students, it's only like 2 minutes. It might be a good introduction if you are teaching a science subject. Magic is a good way to as well. I got this from Barbara Boothaus, and she's in Hungary, and she had her students, her language learners, they were learning English through magic. Okay, so they got to talk about illusions, your eyes, things like that. So if you do teach science, you can definitely have them discover um, the science behind different magic tricks as well. Or that would even work with biology. If you teach biology or anything with the parts of the body, because you talk about vision, and a lot of magic tricks have to do with that as well. Data visualization. Okay. If you teach adults magic, if they have to perform a magic trick in front of their peers, they could find that fun, and that also helps them to present. They learn presentation skills because magicians have to present in a certain way. So you can relate doing magic tricks. They can just do, a real quick one and present it to the class and learn presentation skills. Data visualization, that's one of my favorite ways to teach different topics. You can teach anything with infographics. You can teach religion, history, science, math. Um, you can teach literature, because what you're doing is you're taking what's in the content, and your students, what they do is they create visual maps of it in a way, or they take the data and they visualize that data. There's tons of free tools for that. These are a bunch of them. Thank you, Peggy, for sharing where you can find all of those, shellyturtle.com/poster. When I'm going to show you a particular one. This one is my favorite, which is Piktochart. Piktochart.com, I find it very easy. They give you templates. My favorite that I use a lot with students is the comparison contrast one, coffee versus tea. And they can edit that. So instead, they change it. One we did recently in Venezuela is they did cat versus dogs. Some of them did baseball versus soccer. Some of them did. They got to choose, but they had to interview people and ask them what they prefer, and then they interviewed, and then they made that into infographics. So I like the comparison contrast one, coffee versus tea. I use that template. They have a syllabus template. They have different types of visuals that you can use, and social bookmarking and curation. So this is when your students, you know how you have your favorites and your bookmarks on your browser or in your computer. Well, you can carry that around with you anywhere if you do it on the web. These are some free great tools. One of the ones the one that I think is most safe for students, especially children, is Edgy Clipper. Edgy Clipper is like Pinterest, but it's made for teachers and students. Okay, it's you can actually pin things to a board. You can even give them assignments, okay? So you can grade within this as well. You can give them badges. So you would give them their tasks through Edgy Clipper, through one of these boards. You can give them, and you might include the sites they visit. It could include the rubric, a template if you want them to use a particular template or worksheet or graphic organizer. You can add all of that. This is a free site, by the way. And your students, then they can return a board to you with all the information. So it's really good for flipping the classroom, project-based learning. But the great thing is, whatever you're studying, you can give them. Um, I do it with Pinterest because I tend to teach university students and adults. And so we've done this with Pinterest, and I'll have a board where they can pin about whatever unit. So each unit will have its own board. And then because Pinterest allows collaborative pinning, then my students also add what they have found or discovered for that unit. Virtual field trips, so you can learn a lot about history, geography when you take virtual field trips. Even literature, they have um, Google Lit Trips, and they recently updated that site, so that's very good. If you can get a set, if you can afford some technology, one of the great things, yes, Piktochart has a free version for education. Um, It actually just has a free account that you can use. I haven't had, I make tons of them. So, yes, the tools I share are free. When you take a virtual field trip, now they have something called Google Cardboard. You can get a class set of Google Cardboard, and they're really inexpensive. I've seen some as low as $2. So what it does is it makes it into almost virtual reality. When you see a lot of these sites that say 360 virtual tour, where your students can actually put the Google Cardboard, and if they have a mobile device, it's like they're taking a tour there. So it's really, really cool. I really love Google Cardboard. But of course, they can always go on the computer. If you only have one computer in the classroom, then what I often do is we'll go on a tour as a class, okay? And so I'll have it up on the big screen, and I'll have the projector up there, and I'll ask the students, okay, get into pairs. We're going to decide where are we going next, or what sites would you like to explore? And then we can talk about it as a class. So you can do this with Google Earth, but I'm not going to show you all the sites. Of course, you can go. Peggy has put in the chat box some of the links. Virtual field trips with Google are really great. Oh, the one site I do want to show you is google.com/cultural institute. So here's another way you're teaching the content, but you're also introducing them to culture because they're traveling, and travel is a great way to add that fourth C there. And these are other concepts that teachers are exploring that could be really good for language learners as well. Coding, 3D printing, and maker spaces. A lot of times, organizations are actually giving schools free maker spaces. And one of the reasons why they're doing that is because they figure you're going to have to get more supplies. So they'll set it up for you for free, and they'll even start you with some initial stuff. But these are really cool things I've seen students do. This was in Indiana, and these two boys, they had actually made this with a 3D printer, Yoda there. So they were making some very cool stuff with the 3D printer. And they were also talking about coding in maker spaces. So those are a few ideas to help you with teaching content and language at the same time. When we teach language with the content, we still practice good um, what language teaching. So, for example, whenever they are learning, then we focus. We can bring up grammar. We can show them, what tense is the focus that day. You don't have to have a focus of tenses. You don't have to have a grammar focus. But what you do is when you're teaching the content, point it out. Make a vocabulary list. I often write on the board. I ask my students, we have this right side of the board, and it says words I don't know. And so we'll have throughout the class, the students will write a word they don't know, and we'll look it up together. By the end of the class, we'll have gone over all of those vocabulary words that they don't know. So those are ways to teach content, but also focus on language as well, so they can do both. So thank you all for coming. I will see you next week, and I hope you have a good weekend. I always put the wrong